we'll start right here, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say one quick thing about Adrian Ray's book, because although it's possible that in the fullness of time, neuroscience may be able to predict whether somebody will be violent, I think there's tremendous skepticism in neuroscience about Adrian Ray's so-called results. The fact of the matter is that it is not easy if you have an fMRI of 50 brains to pick out those who on the Hare criteria are psychopaths. And there are lots of people who, relative to the norm, have lowered levels of prefrontal activity and are perfectly normal. And there's lots of people who on the Hare criteria count as psychopaths who have perfectly normal activity in the prefrontal lobe. So I think it's really important to not get too excited about Adrian Ray's results, so-called results.
Oh, I agree entirely, but I give him full marks for exploring the possibility and looking at some, not all, of the practical objections. Even if his results held up, there would still be some very serious moral, ethical objections to preemptive strike treatments, and that's something that I think we really have to look at.
I agree with that.
Although bear in mind that if you actually make a threat, that you can in fact be locked up. So it's not just that, you know, you've got a funny looking brain, but if you actually make a threat, then something can happen. But I think that the jurists, I mean, people like Stephen Morse are quite right to say that it's not good enough to have a funny looking brain.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And there, you know, there's the liberty right if you believe in basic rights, but there's also, you know, the threat of misuse. And so you can, but the thing is, that's a consequentialist worry about this sort of policy, and that's going to kick in my view as well.
Well, let somebody else.
Yeah, Dave. Yeah.
Oh. On the qualitative inaccuracy hypothesis, I really like these introspective illusion views, or this. I'm very interested in this class of views. I'm really glad we're getting to explore these views in a lot of detail on this truth. I think it's worth distinguishing between maybe there's a wishy-washy illusionism and full-throated illusionism about consciousness. I'm a little bit worried that your view is on the there's a little bit on the wishy-washy side, and maybe you're going to end up having to endorse some more full-throated kind to really end up blocking the arguments against materialism that you want to block. I mean, roughly the wishy-washy kind is the one that says, oh yeah, well of course there is consciousness and phenomenology, but it doesn't have certain properties that we take it to have. And the full-throated kind says, actually there's no such thing. You know, there's actually no phenomenal character. We should just junk the whole thing. That's a massive illusion. So one way to bring out, I think, how this comes up in your discussion is thinking about your reply to the knowledge argument, which I haven't, and exactly how the illusionist view, the inaccuracy view, as you conceive of it, gives a reply to the knowledge argument. I mean, I think roughly the thought is, okay, I mean, well, we think that Mary gains some new knowledge when she leaves the black and white room and discovers what it's like to see red. But on your view, no, she just merely gains a new belief, and the belief is actually false. You know, she thinks she discovers something about phenomenology, but no, she's just come to a new misbegotten view about thinking she has some properties that she doesn't have. Right. And that, so some people like Frank Jackson use the fact that Mary seems to learn something to show that, there were truths back inside the black and white room that she didn't know. But you could also make the case for that there are truths back inside the black and white room that Mary didn't know without going through that claim about learning. You can just say, well, there is something it's like to see red, and inside the black and white room, Mary doesn't know what it's like to see red, and furthermore, she's not in a position to know that based on her physical knowledge. Therefore, there's some stuff that she doesn't know, some truths that she doesn't know inside the black and white room. And it seems to me that although you've blocked the inaccuracy moved, tells you what to say about the Mary seems to learn something argument, it doesn't immediately give a diagnosis of what's
of what's going on there. I mean, there's a couple of different things you could say. One is that there is something it's like to see red, and Mary can, in fact, know what it's like to see red from inside the black and white room, based on her physical knowledge. And the thing is, for all you said about qualitative inaccuracy, well, there's still, I think, some work to be done there, in just if that's your view, in justifying that view, saying, I mean, it's obviously counterintuitive to say inside the black and white room, Mary can know what it's like to see red. This isn't to say there aren't a bunch of further things that somebody might say. Dan's got his line on this, and someone's got the line on this. So maybe you've got a line on this, and then, here is how inside the black and white room, Mary actually can know what it's like to see red. I suspect that once you develop that line, then to some extent, that's going to be doing a lot of the work for you, and I'm not sure what work the inaccuracy line is going to be doing. On the other hand, the other view which you can take, which is somehow more in the spirit of the introspective illusion line, is actually there aren't any facts about what it's like to see red. And so inside the black and white room, Mary does know all the facts, because sure, she doesn't know what it's like to see red, but who needs to know that crap? There's no such, there's nothing there really to know. And so that's the line to the full-throated illusionism, which anyway, quite illusionist. I want to encourage you to embrace the full-throated illusionist line, but there's nothing it's like to see red, and no facts to know.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday at dinner. I think that in the middle of the night I woke up and I said, I have to accept the full-throated view. I think otherwise it's not going to work. You're going to be able to run another argument against me. So I'm going to have to accept that. And so it's more like I'm more like you, right? Yeah. Okay. So great. So.
But you're not going to accept Dave's just suggested that there's nothing it's like to see red.
Well, yeah.
It is like something. It's under this illusion.
Yeah. Okay, you're telling me where I'm wrong. Okay, so the way I was thinking about it, I mean, the thing is that I don't want this disagreement to be merely verbal. So my thought was, I can make this exactly analogous to the kind of the color thing, right? So Aristotle thinks that colors are primitive colors, and moderns come along, Locke, for example. No, there are no primitive colors at all. They're just spectral reflectance profiles. This is the Paul Churchland view of Locke, version of Locke. Okay, so you say they're colors. Yeah, they're still colors. That's fine. You can say the colors just different. They're not what we thought they were. They're not primitive. So I guess my thought was this. Are there phenomenal properties? Yeah, they're still phenomenal properties. It's just that there are no primitive phenomenal properties. That's all. That's all you want to say. Yeah, right. There's nothing like that. Okay, so then you say, well, there's still something missing. I say, yeah, there's something missing in the color case as well. There's no primitive colors. That's fine. And in the phenomenal case, there are no primitive phenomenal properties. Then you want to say, well, there's still something that's missing. Namely, in your view, there aren't any. There's nothing that's like to sense red. And then I could say, well, yeah, there's still something that's like to sense red, but it turns out just to be the neural stuff. It's not the. And you say, well, you can't talk that way. That makes no sense. There's got to be some way of expressing what you're giving up. And I want to say, yes, there's something I'm giving up. And one way of expressing it is in what it is like terms, I suppose. All right. So maybe that's the kind of the full-throated view that you want me to.
There is nothing it's like to see red.
There's still. Yeah, that sounds so awful. Yeah. So, but yeah. So.
So you're just saying there's nothing it's primitively like, but that doesn't really sound like it, because that's not what we care about. If we care about this,
but he can say there's nothing that's primitively like. It's like something for each person, but in each person it's going to be different because people's life experience and their physiology and their color vision networks, it's going to be different in every case.
But that's still
but there's always going to be something that's like. It's just not going to be one of these primitive nuggets.
Still, that's victory for qualia fans, really, isn't it?
This is sounding like the wishy-washy view.
What's worrying me about that presentation of qualitative inaccuracy is how anemic it is. I mean, let's say, let's take Keith's term magic. And when somebody sees a lady being cut in half, it's not just qualitative inaccuracy. They're subject to an illusion. The lady isn't really being cut in half. But what follows as a result of believing it's so is hugely effective psychologically and at all sorts of other levels. It changes the idea of what kind of world you live in. Now that's big stuff, and I think qualitative inaccuracy. You don't seem to really want to go for that as if that's an exciting and extraordinary possibility. And if it's true that we are subject to this qualitative inaccuracy and reporting our phenomenal states, it's not true by accident. It's there because nature's designed us to suffer these illusions, and that means that we now need to use the full scope of your introspective method and your intuitions. Everybody wants to do that to get to the phenomenon, which is now what we need to reduce or explain. But and Dan suggesting that the methodology of intuition is somehow one we don't all really try to share. Of course we do. It's where we begin. And we wouldn't have anything to do science on if we didn't start there.
Oh yeah, okay, Jesse. So I have actually lots of things about the consciousness stuff, but I want to come back to free will, and this is partially a follow-up on Dan's suggestion of empirical cost, because I really like your views about free will. I think very, very close to them. There's a debate that looks, I think, from outside the field like a hair-splitting debate, but it's a debate about the incompatibilists who deny responsibility and the incompatibilists who accept responsibility. So basically you versus someone like Fisher. And so I think if you're looking at your view and saying, look, we can be incompatibilists, but still preserve our practices of holding people accountable in some form. But we have to drop responsibility talk. And then there are those who say we should keep responsibility talk. And maybe that's a question that doesn't matter. It's a question I got very interested in because I was really sympathetic to the view that responsibility is totally independent of free will. That there's this old, and Nietzsche thinks responsibility and free will come together, but putting that to one side, Nietzsche has this insight that he gets from Paul Ré, which is that free will talk is a very late invention. That basically practices of punishment have been around, since the beginning of human times. We hold people accountable in some sense, and we penalize them. And this idea of, and the discourse about free will is remarkably recent. Nietzsche thinks the discourse about responsibility is also a consequence of that, the postulation of a will and so on. But I actually think you can show anthropologically and historically that responsibility talk, at least in some legalistic sense, is far older than free will talk. So I got quite interested in looking at this empirically. So one way of doing it is to look at XFI. So I've been reanalyzing a lot of XFI data because I was extremely bothered that a very large percentage of the XFI studies of free will use responsibility DVs, questions about responsibility, as the operationalization of the free will question. So instead of asking, okay, imagine a deterministic universe, and then ask people, do you think people would be free in that universe? That's a proper test for compatibilism. They say, do you think people would be responsible in that universe? And overwhelmingly, in the magnitude of 90% participants in these studies will say, in a deterministic universe, people are responsible. Right. So lo and behold, resounding empirical support for at least the conceptual commitment to compatibilism. And that really sort of raised doubts for me. I thought, no, this is not a measure of compatibilism at all. It shows people want to hold folks responsible, and that's quite robust. Yeah. But when you actually do partial these out, ask people about free will and responsibility separately, they come apart, and they're quite empirically dissociable. So I want to ask you a bit, because in your paper, at least this one, I think the move from no free will to no responsibility is pretty quick, and it's an appeal to intuition. And I want to ask you to say a little bit more about why you think a world without free will has to be one without responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big question. So on the XFI stuff, so a lot of them, in a lot of those XFI studies, moral responsibility stands in for free will, and often like desert is mentioned, so it's some desert notion of responsibility. That doesn't quite get at it from my point of view because it's like basic desert as opposed to desert. Desert's a squishy term. There's some recent study by Oisin Deer, I don't know if you see, and Matt Bedke and Sean Nichols that actually tests for the ability to do otherwise. It's really good. And it goes the incompatibilist way, right? That determinism is incompatible with freedom defined as the ability to act and to refrain. Right? So that's how the folk go on that, at least according to that study. It's got to be true that punishment practices are like way older than the free will discourse. So there's this great kind of posthumous book by Michael Freidak called, what's it called again? something, it's a historical study, the ancient world, the idea of free will. And he thinks that you don't see the idea of free will in the pre-Socratics or in Plato or in Aristotle or the Stoics. That the first time you really clearly see the idea of free will is in the Christian church fathers. And Origen in particular was very concerned about justifying the doctrine of eternal damnation. Okay, there you see that doctrine of free will. For the first time he thinks in a clear way. I think it's a little bit controversial, but it's very interesting. Okay? I guess that, even that may, historically it may be true that, punishment practices and incredibly harsh punishment practices precede any kind of beliefs about free will. I guess I think that, just reflection shows that, at least retributive justifications depend on attribution of free will. That's what Kant thought.
Take Eichmann. Take this kind of Hannah Arendt's analysis of the Eichmann trials, because you get this character for whom a strong case can be made, a case strengthened by subsequent sort of Stanford-style prison experiments, that this was not free complicity, that there's interesting work on who was a rescuer and who was a perpetrator, but the perpetrators of the Holocaust were not simply acting on free will in any metaphysically interesting sense. I didn't think in any conceptually interesting sense. Conceptually, metaphysically, in every social, scientifically, in every way you can look at it, their behavior was a consequence of being located in time and space in a particular way. I would have been a Nazi. I assure you, I'm a Jew. I would have, but had I been a Christian in Germany at that time, I would have been an executioner. Do we not have the trial? I think there's a very robust, and maybe this is just a retributivist urge, but I think it kind of withstands this kind of metaphysical correction. Even knowing that these acts were socially determined in some way, we feel that the process of penalty here is justified. And I think that's a deep insight into how we think about punishment and responsibility.
Yeah. I guess I agree with that. I think that's true, and that's the way that's how I feel about it. But I guess that upon reflection, I want to go the other way. And certainly that idea is out there. If you think about like Calvinism, the religion I grew up in, God determines everybody to do everything, and still, big chunks of the population deserve eternal damnation. Why do you think I have the view I do, right? You got to spend your life reacting against your upbringing. Huh? So, so I think that's right. And, John Fisher and I, our views he thinks are very, very close, and I agree. And he wants to say what you do, that there's just something very human about thinking that a guy like Eichmann should be, punished. But I don't know. Maybe there's a way of justifying that, or there's a way of justifying that reaction independently of basic desert, saying, look, it's part of what it is to be human to punish these bad people. So maybe there's a certain kind of expressivism, like expressive of what we care about as opposed to basic desert justification, which I think, so a kind of expressivism about punishment might not be ruled out by what I want to say about free will.
Good. But then you can be an expressivist about responsibility.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, that's right. And that maybe makes the incompatibilist and the compatibilist very, very close. Right, great, okay. Yes?
Go back to the primitive, non-primitive qualia thing. Mm-hmm. It seems to me there's kind of two ways that you could be non-primitive, if you like. One way is you could still be special, but you could be structured. The other is you're no more special than, say, recognizing dogs and cats and chairs and tables. So, in other words, we recognize the qualitative properties of things around us just the way that we recognize that some things are dogs, some things are cats. There's no further problem. Seems to me it kind of matters which of those two ways of being non-primitive someone might endorse, because one of them leaves all of the issues I think Dave was raising there intact. You think they're special. It's not like spotting dogs and cats. So in that case, it seems like science must have some harder job to do for some time. Whereas I'm kind of inclined to the other view, the one that says it's just like spotting dogs and cats. Actually, they're structured. There's all the subpersonal structured stuff going on. Tell the same story about them as you tell about dogs and cats.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why can't I should go for that view, right? Yeah. So why can't I go for that view on the?
Yeah. I think it's much more.
That's good. Okay, that's a nice distinction.
You ended up. I didn't fully understand your appeal to primitiveness announcement. I said, come on, say there's nothing that's like to see red. And you said, no, I just really need to say there's nothing primitively that's like to see red. This is sounding like, again, like a version of the wishy-washy view. It just doesn't have that property. On the face of it, the Mary argument didn't make any presuppositions about primitiveness. It just deals with some all prima facie obvious facts. There's something it's like to see around. Mary doesn't know it inside the room. Blah blah blah. Conclusion. So there's got to be some footwork to block that argument. And it seems to me that merely saying, well, he doesn't know primitively is sort of hiding out there and blocking the argument.
No, after the
conversation, I realize that some of my presentation in the book is wishy-washy, and I hereby, at least for now, retract the wishy-washiness of the presentation.
So you are willing to say that there is nothing it's like to see around?
Yeah, that's right. There may be phenomenal properties, but given what you mean by what it's like to say Ray, yeah, there's nothing it's like to see
So
Ray.
is it like spotting dogs?
Yes,
and cats?
spotting dogs and cats. That's right. That's right. That's what I'm going to go for now.
You must bring Philip in, because he told me an hour ago that he interpreted you as being on David's side.
Not with this stuff, with the question was Richard. Anyway, yeah, just a different way to see this weaker form of illusionism that you see rather than maybe a stronger form that other people respond to my help. I thought as I read it, I thought it's important for you that phenomenal concepts refer, right?
Yes.
That they, there's a problem with them, they mischaracterize, but they actually refer. So in that sense, you can't say, there's nothing that it's like, because those concepts refer. But I find that actually a problematic form of illusionism for the following reason. Because phenomenal concepts seem to characterize phenomenal properties as bearing certain resemblances, structures. Phenomenal red, more similar to phenomenal orange than it is phenomenal. There seem to be these structures in. So if the phenomenal inaccuracy hypothesis is correct, then got the question, and those concepts, those very concepts that Dave likes and I like, you think they refer, but they refer to brain states. So the question, do those brain states bear those resemblant structures? And I can't see if you say yes, then it seems like that's a real fluke.
What about the analogy to color again?
If you say no, then it seems like they don't really refer, because that seems like
well, I don't know. Why can't you draw the analogy to color again? So the thing is, our ordinary view of color is primitive color, and colors bear certain kinds of structural relationships to one another. There isn't primitive color, we all agree, but there are still structural relationships among the various molecular bases for spectral reflectance profiles. Why couldn't the same sort of thing be true in the phenomenal case?
But does it have to be true? So I want to know, do those concepts still refer if it isn't true?
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be true, but it still might well be true.
It seems like that ought to be a constraint on reference. Sorry.
Don't make this so dichotomous. The facts that are revealed by psychophysical experiments and so forth reveal structures. Those are true. Do they have? Now, does there have to be something that explains them? I think the answer is yeah, there has to be something that explains them. But it can be as devious an explanation as you like. It doesn't have to be lining up property for property.
I think this is an important way in which Dirk is maybe closer to me and Dave than to you, in that you believe in phenomenal concepts as characterized by people like us, and you think they refer.
Right.
And those concepts plausibly do characterize concepts as having phenomenal properties having these resemblance relations. Whereas the story you gave was about psychophysics, that wasn't to do with phenomenal concepts revealing. So I think there is an important difference. But there's an important difference between you two in that you believe in phenomenal concepts and you think they refer.
Yeah. Is that a deep difference? I'm wondering how deep that difference is now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very deep at all. You can have a concept, but have a very different view of how that concept is supported by reality, or what structures it has, or whether it's more like categories of cats and dogs. Certainly you can have phenomenal concepts.
You have a concept of God.
Certainly.
Well, I thought that Dirk's view was, the full-throated view is going to be that phenomenal concepts do refer to certain pure, pristine, beautiful properties that nothing actually has.
Right. Yeah. So it's
Sure they refer, but
yeah. So it's the.
what they refer to.
Yeah. So it's I want to tell a story that's similar to your Edenic story about color concepts.
Yeah.
Right.
What you don't want to go for is the other view that Philip was putting in your mouth. That, they do refer to brain states. That's wishy-washy illusion.
But what refers?
The way you put those together is you say they refer to these properties that don't exist. But if you want an account of what they are ordered by, what explains them, which usually we satisfied by saying what they refer to. But in this case, since they don't refer, we have to give this alternative account.
I think we've also bought in a little bit too fast to the idea that there's wishy-washy and muscular. Because it seems to me that your view is much more muscular than wishy-washy. And you shouldn't be cornered into having to say, no, there's nothing it's like to be in pain. No, you shouldn't be cornered into saying that. The view is that there are these structured properties, and they probably correspond in some way to properties in the physical brain, or else to something real.
All I'm saying is yes to answer that simple statement of the knowledge argument. I know you've got your response, and Dan's got his response, and Paul's got his response, but I haven't yet heard what Zurich's response is, the one driven by the inaccuracy view, unless it's to deny that.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to go for.
So, I guess I don't think it's what I really think. So, that we're kind of, it's hard to express in the public language what I want to accept and what I want to deny. But look, I've got to give up something, and that's what qualitative inaccuracy is all about. You're saying that there's something that's inaccurate. So something we ordinarily think exists doesn't exist. Okay. So how do we refer to that? I'm happy to use your term, the what it's like feature. Right. So So what it's like feature. There's something that we're going to give up, and I'm happy to say it's the what it is like feature. Okay, that's all. I think I'm forced to say something like that. All right. Yeah.
Just for clarification, because I don't follow this debate, what is it about the knowledge argument that forces anything to be given up?
It doesn't.
The relationship between knowledge argument and accuracy.
Well, Lisa, this is I don't know about force, but the thing is that on this response to the knowledge argument, Mary doesn't acquire any new true beliefs when she leaves the room. Right? She might acquire the belief that, hey, I just found out about a new property in the world, the phenomenal redness. Okay, that turns out to be, to the extent that she thinks that's a new belief, it turns out to be a false belief. Okay?
So the false belief is the meta belief that her belief is new, referring to
no, it doesn't have to be the meta belief. It just, let's say, so suppose she comes to have the belief, seeing red has R, where R is a phenomenal concept. Right? So, and there are two hypotheses as to what R refers to. R might refer to some, physical property, okay? Some straightforwardly physical property. If it refers to the straightforwardly physical property, it's a true sentence. But Mary already knew that sentence, had that belief while she was in the room.
That sounds meta, though. So when the error comes in her attribution of this belief that she has being a different belief than the belief she has.
Yeah, maybe that's right. It's a way to get. Yeah, okay.
So, that's very far from qualitative inaccuracy. That's not a mistake about our quality.
Well,
it's a mistake about our.
Well, at that level, that's right. So the qualitative inaccuracy doesn't come in directly in the analysis of the belief. Okay, the qualitative inaccuracy is an introspective inaccuracy. Okay, it's an. But then, so the account of what's going on in the Mary argument makes use of machinery other than merely qualitative inaccuracy.
I'm not sure that there's introspective inaccuracy. I mean, she's accurate about her R attribution when she has it later on. She had no such introspective access prior to the experience.
But see, I think it's underlain by her.
She has a false semantic theory. She doesn't realize these beliefs co-refer, but that seems a very weak form.
But that has its root in introspection representing phenomenal states as having these qualitative characters that they don't have, because that's the underlying explanation as to the other error. That's how I see it.
Okay. Yeah. I guess this will come out in another discussion. But what's unclear to me is how in that second belief she's somehow misrepresenting the way things are. The belief after leaving the room, what the error is there. That sounds more like a first order error, the way you just described it.
Yeah.
And that would lead to an inaccuracy hypothesis. But I suspect that the meta view, it's a kind of inaccuracy, but it's such an attenuated one that one need not adopt some self-flagellating label about being a systematic error theorist.
Right. Yeah, so how's that really go? So I guess my view of phenomenal concepts there, I take a page from Putnam, and I say that they're, like the concept R in this belief has a structure of a conjunction of conditionals, right? So if it turns out to be the actual world is one in which there are primitive colors, then R refers to primitive redness. If the actual world is like ours, I'm thinking, then it refers to maybe the causal basis of it may refers to something like molecular bases of spectral reflectance profiles. Okay. So that sort of, and so then on that view, Mary's belief sensing red has R turns out to be true because it picks out one of those conditionals. Okay, so that's it.
Yeah. Maybe be the last comment. Go ahead.
Oh, the last one.
Yeah.
I would like to complain about the language in which the formula
Okay.
and this is the background of this, is that I think the whole problem around consciousness is not talking about properties of experiences or properties of properties, but rather a problem about properties of experiencing subjects.
So I didn't hear that last thing. Property.
Properties of experiencing subjects. It's
Okay.
not about the reddishness I'm presented with, for instance,
I see. Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
about being presented with reddishness.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the properties we should be interested in.
Okay.
Now, on that background, I'm unhappy with your description that in introspection we are under the impression that seeing red has some qualitative property that invites a very distorted view about what's going on in introspection.
Okay.
It's as if I'm presented with a property, and then it appears to me as if that property had a second order property which is qualitative. I find it extremely hard to make even sense of that kind
Okay.
of this way of talking. And so I would like to propose to translate it
Okay.
in a language which is less problematic. And in my view, what happens then is that the plausibility goes away.
Okay.
And so the less problematic terminology would be to talk about seeing something red, and then in introspection, I'm aware of a certain aspect of my overall phenomenology when I attend to my seeing something red. And what could it mean then that I'm under the impression that it's qualitative in nature, or that it has a qualitative property or something?
Then I would
Say
say.
what it means. I'm not at the
Okay. Then I would say I would describe it as follows:
sorry?
your awareness of your phenomenology is inaccurate in a certain respect.
Okay, but
I'm
I'm
not-
trying to understand, I'm still trying to understand what it means to be under the impression that this is a qualitative property, or that it has a qualitative. And my proposal is, it's just being aware of the difference. When you look at something red and then look at something blue, a change takes place. Okay, we should agree with this. Now, what kind of change is it? It's very natural to say it's a qualitative change,
Yeah.
but if you don't want to use these terms, it doesn't matter. I would say this is the typical example to introduce what qualitative means. It's a certain kind of change.
Yeah.
And to say that I'm aware in introspection of the qualitative nature of the property of seeing red, for me is nothing but this. It
Well-
makes a difference for the way it is for me to see things.
Yeah.
That's all, nothing more. And this is
Well,
all
that's kind of
that
a.
is needed, I think, for the Chalmers time.
I don't know. It's kind of a functional analysis. I mean, the thing is that, look, even if you only had one color experience in your entire life, a red one, right?
Okay.
You even without noticing any color changes in your world,
course.
there's still something you're going to be aware of, right? So
Yes.
I don't think that phenomenal awareness of this sort can be
No,
reduced
but you can be
to
aware
awareness
of
of
this
change.
aspect as opposed to the auditory, as opposed
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
okay?
Okay, good,
And
yeah.
then you focus on a specific aspect of the overall phenomenology.
Yeah.
And that's something you don't want to deny.
Yeah, I don't want to deny that. That's
Okay,
right.
And that's all.
Yeah.
And how could that be? That's not obviously not a mistake and not an illusion.
It can be an illusion. I don't know. I guess I don't see that. But anyway, so we can make a fight about that.
On
Yeah.
the full sort of view, you can say, oh, you're not really focusing on anything when you're focusing on the phenomenology.
exactly.
You're just focusing on something you think is there. That's
That, and there's maybe there's
Dan
something.
used to write these wonderful full-throated papers with titles like "On the Absence of Phenomenology." Those were
Yeah,
and
I
then
haven't
people
retracted
didn't
them.
take them so seriously. So
I see.
then he
Yeah.
started going for this wishy-washy view. But I think it was
No, I haven't backed up an inch from that view.
Good. All
I
right.
just don't want to repeat myself.
Okay.
Some people have the same song they sing all the time. I try to change the song.
Mm-hmm. Great.
I think this is a good. All right, so this was an hour and a quarter.
After the presentation, or
from start to
Finish, okay.
And how do people feel? Do you want to take a 5-minute break right now?